Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Health Performance Interview Series, where we interview local Singapore experts in all things longevity, performance, and overall health. Today, we had Dr. Peng Boon Pay, head coach here at F45, as well as coaching high-level athletes that compete internationally. He has his PhD from NTU in Exercise Physiology, and he actually competes in HYROX as well. So he was really the perfect guy to ask about the science behind better training for hybrid athletes. One of my favorite parts of our conversation today that you'll hear in just a moment is how he actually ended up training less for HYROX Bangkok, but yet got a better time. And so we explore a lot of different aspects about being a hybrid athlete, what it means, how to train better, supplementation, recovery. Is really an overall great conversation for anybody that is in the HYROX or hybrid athlete space and really is just looking to perform better. I hope you enjoy our interview with Boon.
So you were just in Bangkok for HYROX. How'd it go?
Well, a little bit better than expected. To be honest, for all the HYROX races I've taken part in, we never really had enough time to train for it. So we had very last minute preparations. I had 6 weeks to build up to it. And in that short time, even I was going through a really busy period at work. So I could really only train twice a week.
Oh, really?
So I did what I could, and the results were a bit better than what we expected. And I think the real surprising thing here is I felt less fit going into this race as compared to the previous race. But what the outcome showed was that we did better, and not only that, but we also did a harder category. So it's like a double win, you know. We surpassed our previous timing and we competed in a harder category. So we were quite pleased, you know. But what I think we've learned from this journey is a lot of it comes from that mental strength. You know, I think physically I don't feel as strong as I was in the previous race, but mentally we are probably a few notches higher, and I think that's what really helped us to secure a better timing this time.
So you did men's pro double this time.
That's right. That's right.
What did you get for your time this time?
Compared to the last one?
Yeah.
So the last time we did 120 with a lot of training, you know, but I guess mentally we weren't as strong to push through the really hard periods of the race. So in this race we did 116, so that's a 4 minutes improvement. And what was different was we took very little rest. So that means when the going got tough, we persevered, we pushed through, we told ourselves not to rest, and that was what got us to improve our run times. And stations wise, we actually did a bit slower, mostly because the weights were heavier. I had less time to train for like traditional strength. So really, we relied on mental strength and just more strategic running training.
So with your background in exercise science and training some, higher level athletes, how did you use that kind of background into making what sounds like a very concise training plan to be efficient with the limited amount of time to actually train and the training window to ultimately increase your performance at HYROX?
Yeah, so I think being concise and being very efficient with my training plan is exactly what I'm able to do only because I had my kind of background. And I always like to say it this way: for the lazy people, sports science allows you to take shortcuts towards better performance, and that's really a fact. So I just shared that I had 6 weeks to train for it, and I could only afford about 2 hours of training a week. That's nowhere close to how much a person should spend preparing for it. You want to build a strong foundation, you want to work at a really high threshold, you want to have some recovery days. I had none of those because I was too busy. So I guess having my sort of background allowed me to identify the actual demands of the race. And with those demands already known, how do I train specifically for it? At times cutting corners, at times disregarding foundation and just aiming to achieve specific outcomes. For example, HYROX is it's kind of an aerobic kind of sport, right? There are short bursts of strength movements. At times you got to run fast. At times you get to do recovery runs when you're in the rock zone. So on paper, it looks like you have got to run 8 kilometers, which you do, but it is not 8 continuous kilometers, right? So given the fact that it is broken down into 8 laps of 1 km runs, that allowed me to identify that, okay, you're not running 1 km 8 times is totally different from running 8 continuous kilometers, and so I can really just train intervals. There is no need for me to include long distance runs in my training program. So that is the shortcut that I took. I trained purely for intervals, and that saved me a day of running for an hour or longer in terms of running preparation. Yeah, so that's one. And if you were to look at the strength demands of HYROX, the heaviest one being having to push 200 kilograms on the sled push, you know. So you ask yourself this question: how much does a person have to squat in order to be able to move the amount of weight? You know, you might think, it's 200 kilograms of weights I have to drag across the floor, so maybe I've got to squat 150 kilos. But then you apply the science and realize that you're not actually lifting up 200 kilograms and walking across the turf, you know. So you can use certain leverages to your advantage. So just refining your technique can really help to make that strength transfer more efficient. So the matter of fact was, I didn't train specifically for traditional strength because I didn't have the time, I couldn't afford it, and weighing the amount of time I had, it was just better to just train how to be a better sled pusher than trying to increase my 1 RM for squat. You know, so these were the little shortcuts I took when I sat down to plan my training program.
So instead of maybe the kind of classic HYROX training approach where you want to build that big foundation of strength, and then you're also building the big foundation of running, instead of trying this kind of big holistic time-consuming plan, you kind of train specifically for sport so you could execute for those specific events.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly that.
So then when you think of kind of hybrid athlete training, right, it's the mix of kind of cardio, strength, a little bit of endurance. What are some of the other misconceptions that maybe people have when it comes to hybrid training, and how they could, kind of tweak the model to make it either more efficient or better for their outcome?
Right. I think if we look at the definition of what a hybrid athlete is, I don't think there is a clear definition. I think that when people think about being a hybrid athlete, it means they are decent at running, decent at strength activities. So they then take a page out of people who are good runners and a page out of people who are good strength athletes.
There's a great meme online that's like, thank you for whoever invented the term hybrid athlete, because really I'm just a bad runner and an average lifter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if that is, it can be somewhat insulting, but I think it is also very true. Because, but yet again, being that means that you are already specializing in a very specific type of sport or event, which pure strength athletes would not excel in. Pure endurance athletes would not excel in as well. So what you have is a very special type of athlete who aren't great at both, but when you create an event that based around these two elements, they would be the best. You can't get an endurance runner to perform better than a hybrid athlete, neither can you get a strength athlete to perform better than a hybrid athlete. So I think it is something new that's emerging in this field. Sorry, the CrossFitters might actually disagree with me. So let me rephrase that, right? So I think...
Well, to be fair, the CrossFitters were never running that far to begin.
Maybe, yeah.
It really kind of comes down to, when you think of the hybrid athlete, right? It's that strength and endurance. And instead of saying, well, I need to run like a marathon runner and I need to lift like a power lifter, you have to start thinking of even though it's two things coming together, it's now its own unique category in the middle of the Venn diagram. So you really need to be training and thinking about it different. And so, it kind of leads into the next question, which was putting those two things together is very demanding. So how, if you, maybe a little bit more detail of like, how do you manage those two things when you're putting them together to make the training like you were doing, more efficient, right? Because I think, at least historically for kind of CrossFitters, like rates of injuries were quite high, right? And I think you'll probably see something with hybrid athletes because they're not known for their recovery of injuries coming back. So, the question would be, the training is very demanding, but what are the like actual tactical steps of bringing those things together, right? Is it making sure you do an endurance day, strength day, rest day, and cycle like that, or like kind of what would be your approach to someone doing it?
I think the first question to ask is, what kind of event are we training for? Right now, the most popular one would be HYROX. And HYROX, if you really study the type of movements, they're all pretty simple. They're all very linear. There's no need for you to do side shuffles, to do crazy rotational body movements. So if you are trying to train specifically for a race as such, then that makes things a lot easier. That means your training does not have to include very complex movements, right? So once you can identify what kind of race you are training for, what we as sports scientists like to do is to do a needs analysis. So we look at what kind of energy system gets taxed the most, what kind of body movements are such athletes always exposed to, what are movements that are repetitive in the sport that could lead to higher risk of injuries. So we try and address each one of these needs. And from there, we craft a training program to ensure that we look after all of these things, and then we try and feed it within an athlete's time schedule. So I think if we are just talking about the next couple of years, I think HYROX has still a long runway to go. More and more people are going to want to train for HYROX, and those who have done it would want to do better. So I think as such, then it's very simple. The current definition of a hybrid athlete means you've got to be decently good at running. So what is decent, I guess, if you were to take the top, would you say that being better than half of the races in HYROX will make you a decent runner or a decent hybrid athlete?
Yeah.
All right. If you say so, that means you are probably looking at a 4:30 minute per km kind of pace, being able to run that casually. Because if you look at the historic data of all races we have taken part in HYROX, you would see that many of them are clocking those kind of times per km. But the one thing to note about that is this graph is slowly shifting towards faster run times. Comparing data from a year ago or 2 years ago, people weren't running so fast. Like I just shared with you, I did a 1:16, and that is not even the 50th percentile. In my category. For me to get to the 50th percentile, I have to be doing the race at 1:10, 1 hour and 10 minutes. So next year it could be 1:08. The year after that it could be a 1:06. So it's continually shifting and shifting and shifting. But it will definitely stagnate at some point. So I think being able to run like 4:30 per km or 4 minutes per km, that would be the kind of goals that we want to achieve to call ourselves a decent hybrid athlete. So then we start making plans towards these goals. So someone who's aiming for such, so someone who's trying to achieve such times could then consider, because 4:30 to 4 minutes per km is a pretty fast speed. On the treadmill, that's anywhere between 15 km to 16 km per hour. If you are not an athlete, you'll probably not be exposed to such fast running pace. So that means you're gonna have to expose yourself to running at a faster speed, which is hard to sustain for long periods. So what would be good is to then start running at such speeds but for shorter durations. So then you introduce the idea of doing intervals. You run at a fast pace, take a bit of rest, run at a fast pace, take a bit of rest. That's going to accustom your muscles, your tendons, and just your system to be able to run at a fast speed. So I think if most people who are trying to be better runners, they then consult the internet. And what the internet would say is that, okay, to have a holistic running program, you've got to have your tempo runs, you've got to have your long, slow distance, you've got to have your recovery runs. Tempo runs would be trying to match a very high speed that is quite close to your lactate threshold, one that is fast but yet does not exhaust you in a few minutes. Your long slow distance is one that you can sustain for 30 minutes or more. And then your recovery run should be something that's around a zone 2 kind of pace. So if you were to do that, then that really requires 3 days of running in a week. As a hybrid athlete, you have to ask yourself, do I have 3 days that I can put aside to train for running? So if not, then perhaps which one of these types of running can I take out? Perhaps if recovery runs is something that is, the purpose of it is to help you recover better. Perhaps if you can't do recovery runs, could you then have a recovery session in the gym that is not running based, that you could stack on top of a strength day? Maybe that is something that we could do. One thing I think that people are not really doing, I'm not seeing much of it, is working on mobility, working on their stabilizing muscles. And I think those things are, training for mobility, stability, and just core muscles are not very high intensity to begin with, and those are things that I think can be used as a form of recovery. It doesn't spike your heart rate, it is not very mentally or physically fatiguing, but it still engages your muscle, it makes them work, and it's low to moderate level of intensity. So perhaps one way in which we could replace recovery runs could be, maybe I'll just do a mobility stability session that doesn't have to be very long. It could be 30 minutes to 45 minutes. I add in a bit of core work because the core muscles are very hard to overtrain, and that could be something you do in place of recovery runs. So another downside of doing too much running, that is, if you try and do your tempo runs, you try and do your long slow distance, or all these runs coupled together, you might end up with a high mileage, which could lead to overuse injuries. So I think taking out one run to do something else that can be equally beneficial could be a way in which we relook training for hybrid athletes.
I think that you made a lot of great points, kind of about how it can seem like there's a lot of training to be done, right? But we can't forget to have recovery. And if you kind of look at, I'll at least say, the hybrid athlete influencer space, you don't see a lot of talk about recovery, and if they're talking about it, they're not really showing it. It kind of seems like they're working out 7 days a week. And I can at least speak for myself, right? I'm not 19 years old anymore. I can't really do that. And I think you brought up an interesting point about potentially taking out one of those recovery days, or like recovery runs, and kind of having a recovery day, we'll call it, where you're working on some of those kind of accessory movements or secondary muscles that are helping with stability, that can actually help prevent injury.
Exactly.
And I'd be curious, like, what are some of the other kind of strategies that you might consider underrated or underutilized when it comes to recovery, but might help hybrid athletes feel like they're still doing something, right? Because I think for a lot of people training for HYROX, it's like, well, I didn't do my 4 lifts and my 4 runs this week, and like, am I really preparing enough for it? When, I think, you can probably talk about it, like having a recovery day or 2 can actually be the thing that makes the difference, not the extra run.
Right. I think when we look at the recovery on the broader spectrum, there are so many levels to that. There are the recoveries that you do in between training sessions within a week. There are the recovery that you do after a race. And so let's address perhaps all of these one by one. I think between training days in a week, suppose I'm training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, what can I do in between to maximize my recovery? I would say first and foremost, get sufficient sleep. In a country like Singapore, where everybody is also so focused and so hardworking at work, it's always an issue when it comes to getting 8 hours of rest. So that's the one thing that is, to some people, it is impossible to achieve, because they've got the family to go back to, and they have to squeeze in training, they've got parents to look after, and they've got a career to work on. So if sleep is something that is out of the question, then I think we got to look at nutrition, making sure that we are providing our bodies with the best possible high quality food, getting enough energy, getting enough protein so that it's a muscle repair. And where possible, I think we need to consider supplements that can, number one, help us to recover better in terms of performance in the gym. There are supplements out there that can boost performance. There are supplements out there that can reduce the perception of exercise fatigue or difficulty. I think all of these are things that, just think about it. If I'm exercising at a 10 out of 10 intensity on Monday, and I would like to repeat the same feat on Wednesday, a supplement that can help me to feel more refreshed and reduce the perception of fatigue can help me to match the same intensity as I did, although it's just spaced 48 hours apart. So I think, and that plays a lot on your mental state, because being able to repeat another training session at the same level of intensity is very motivating, and being unable to hit the same levels of intensity can be quite discouraging. So I think supplements is something that can play a huge role in someone who's trying to be competitive and trying to juggle other areas in life. So sleep and nutrition, I think, are the lowest hanging fruit that we should try and achieve. I think one that's a bit underrated is, we know that a person's stress level can affect how they recover. For example, our brain controls so many functions in the body on a systemic level. When a person is under immense stress, whether it's family stress, work-related stress, or just emotional difficulties, the brain controls how you feel, and it regulates how the body functions. So when a person is under immense stress, and this can be measured based on the cortisol level in the body, exercise increases cortisol levels, and in cases of extreme mental stress, it also increases cortisol level, although they are both very, very different mechanisms. Right? I could put myself through a very intense treadmill run, you will see higher blood cortisol level. Or if you were to put me through a very, very intense presentation in front of thousands, that could also increase my cortisol level. So in a society like Singapore, where people are just working so hard, they might be facing high levels of mental stress that could be chronic. So if you're looking at people who are chronic stressors at work, and perhaps even at home, that means cortisol level really never decreases. So for me to help this person recover better, it is not about sleep or nutrition anymore. It could be this person needs to learn how to regulate the way they look at stress management. So the solution to that could be meditation. So it's a different way of looking at stress that I don't think I've seen many people mention.
It sounds like there's kind of like 4 things there, and I'll take them in a different order. But so the first one is, really dealing with mental stress, no matter where it comes from in your life, right? And it sounds like maybe one of your tools in the toolbox for that could be meditation. When you're looking at sleep, is there any kind of like recommendations or things that you recommend? I know for myself, like if I read before bed and I take some magnesium, I think it's L-threonate is kind of like the popular one for sleep, 45 minutes before bed helps me significantly. I don't know if you have any kind of like sleep tips that could help people.
Yeah, well, in terms of trying to get the best possible sleep, or before that, let's even talk about the recommended amount of sleep to get. I think a lot of people of my age, they believe that the body is too invincible. They believe in the fact that their bodies can survive on 4 to 5 hours of sleep, which they might feel is sufficient at this point, but based on what the research have shown, nobody's body is performing at 100% when they aren't getting at least 7 hours of sleep. Only a very, very small population of people, and we're talking about very small decimals, are able to perform at a high level and function at a high level, be able to solve problems quickly when they are sleep deprived.
Yeah.
So anybody who is not getting 7 hours of sleep can be considered sleep deprived.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, I think having good sleep habits can really work. You know, and by habits I mean, are you going to bed at the same time every day? You know, it is much easier to form a habit where you shut off at a specific time every single day than to have a yo-yo type of sleeping routine where you sleep at 9 p.m. on some days and then 1 a.m. on other days. It's much better to form a habit where you strictly abide by your self-imposed restrictions of turning off all electronics at 10 p.m. and being in bed by 10:30, and then making sure that by 11 your mind is no longer thinking about anything but just sleep. You know, and to help that, I think what the experts call sleep hygiene is staying away from blue light emitting devices. That could be a television, that could be even overhead lights, and that seems to sometimes keep people awake. More so if the content that they're engaging with is something that makes you think. You know, if you're reading the news at night right before bedtime, and if that's causing you to worry about the economy, and that's a sure way to keep you awake. You know, so we should avoid mentally stimulating content, number one. Number two is to try and just avoid devices in general. So that then causes us to ask the question, what do we do in the time before, or rather in the half an hour to 1 hour before bedtime? What can we, how can we best do activities that can lead to better sleep? One thing that I'm fond of is, because of the fact that many people right now, or most people have a desk job. You know, having a desk job means that you probably are stuck in a position where the muscles are shortened, you don't get to move around a lot, and that results in muscle tightness. You know, so perhaps a good activity to think about right before bedtime is stretching. You know, go through a simple mobility routine half an hour before bedtime that helps you to unwind, not just physically but mentally. You are not thinking about work, you are thinking about muscles and stretching and how the muscles are feeling better while you stretch. And I think that really distracts you from your day-to-day chaotic thoughts. You know, so I think having a sleep routine where you end the day off with stretching, meditation is a good way in which we have better sleep, and just helps us to achieve continuous rest at night.
Yeah, so it really comes down to kind of having a sleep protocol, if you will.
Yes.
Right. You know, I know for myself, it's I don't know what it's called, but if you have an iPhone and you go into the health app, you can schedule it so your phone goes on do not disturb at a certain amount of time before the bedtime that you normally go to. So I normally get an indicator of like, oh, this is the time where I start, you know, I go brush my teeth, wash my face, settle down, kind of do the thing, and so that your body falls into the routine so it can like sleep better. Let's move on to something else you were talking about is supplementation, right? So you work with athletes that compete at a high level. What do you see that people are using that provide real results?
So often athletes come to me for advice, not just for training, but also for diet and supplementation. And one of the things that they want to know is what kind of supplements should they consider taking. And many of them don't or have been considering it. They are quite skeptical about the safety of supplements. They are a bit worried about damaging their body in the process of exploring supplements. So there's always a small element of fear and doubt when it comes to taking supplements. So my advice to them, or my recommendation, is always the two most studied supplements that has been studied for so long, where its safety has been established already. One of them is whey protein. Whey protein is big. I mean, you may or may not have to take a whey protein supplement depending on whether you are consuming or receiving enough from your diet. If you aren't, then a protein supplement would be a great way for you to achieve your protein needs. The other one, you can also receive it through your diet. It's just very hard for you to achieve sufficient of it, and for you to measure it, and that's creatine. Now, creatine is one of those supplements that has been studied for so long. It is a very affordable supplement, and the earliest studies on creatine dates back to decades ago. So it has been tried and tested, and its effects have been shown to be consistent, and it's naturally occurring. So for people who are on the fence, they don't want to take chemicals. What they fear is like very chemically altered kind of compounds. Then creatine is derived from natural ingredients, and it is safe. It is something that has very little side effects, and the side effects normally are gastrointestinal related, and those are very transient. Most people respond very well to creatine, and that's the one thing that I recommend them to take.
Yeah, I think a lot of those benefits that you listed are the reason that it's become so popular with hybrid athletes, right? They want that little extra performance, they want the muscle maintenance aspect, and even though it's maybe only a small boost here and there, when you think about something like HYROX, right? Having that little extra boost at the beginning of each station, each run, right? Something that's just helping you sustain better has become, really kind of critical into people's training. And is one of the reasons that, we put it in our supplement, is that so people can get it every day and get it easily, right? Because you mentioned that it is a natural product and it's found in meat, right? But I believe if you look at the research to get what the equivalent of a 5-gram scoop is, right, from a product like ours, is you would have to eat like 2.5 kilos of red meat a day, which, like, if you think about that, like, one, that's a lot of meat. Two, that'd be very expensive in Singapore, like even in the States, right? That's right. Like, I was like, wow, like 2 kilos of steak is like, I can't afford to do that every day.
Exactly.
So, it's one of those things where it's become popular because there's, like 30 plus years of research. It's affordable, and it's one of the safer, more studied supplements out there. So earlier you talked about some supplements that can help reduce perceived exertion when working out, and which can ultimately help, recovery, get you back for the next training session quicker. Are there any supplements that, you have either tried yourself or have kind of heard about that help athletes do that?
Right. There are so many ingredients being tested in the field of science that researchers are trying to find out which supplement can match the same level of effectiveness as what creatine has shown us. So creatine and whey protein are just at like the highest tier of supplements where its effectiveness has been demonstrated. It can be replicated over and over again. So it's a very reliable supplement that is now almost like a typical recommendation when you ask for anybody's top 5 list of supplements to consume. I think not far down that list would be this compound called rhodiola rosea. And I think that is a supplement that what the research has shown, it has been able to reduce the perception of fatigue. And when that happens, it means when I run at a 5 km pace on the treadmill today, and I feel like, okay, that felt like a 9 out of 10 difficulty. And then when I run it the next time, having consumed the supplement, I may feel like the same pace feels a little bit easier to me today. And that could be, we can't discount the effect of the repeated bout effect, where doing something the second time always feels easier. But consuming a supplement like rhodiola could actually also induce that kind of effect. And so when you can tolerate a certain exercise intensity better, it means you can do it longer. When we can do it longer, that means you are potentially gaining more benefits and putting the body through a higher intensity exercise for longer, and hence you are more accustomed to higher levels of training. So I think that's one of the supplements that I think is very promising. I always recommend that people who are looking to supplement should do their own research. And I think that is one of those things that I firmly believe has a place in the top 5 list of supplements in any hybrid athlete's supplementation stack, and that's one I've really encouraged doing more research yourself, find out more about its benefits, and decide for yourself whether it is the right time and place for you to even consume it. I think any kind of supplement that can help you to reduce perceived fatigue is so important for someone like myself when I'm working a full-time job, and sometimes at the end of a long day I don't have as much mental strength to push through a tough training session. So then if I could consume a supplement that helps me to reduce the perceived fatigue when I'm working at a high intensity, that already allows me to train according to my training plan without me having to regress the intensity. And that helps me to stay motivated. It helps me to, it is encouraging for me, and it helps me to stay on track in making progress in terms of my training. So I think anyone who's thinking of trying to compete at a race like HYROX and wants to have as little disruption to their training plan as possible should then consider a supplement like rhodiola rosea, and that's going to help them stay focused and have less hurdles to cross in terms of training setbacks.
Yeah. The last supplement that I want to talk about, and I think regardless of the type of training or exercise you're doing, living in Singapore, it's relevant to everyone, and that's electrolytes and hydration.
Yes.
Right? So, what is your recommendation to athletes when it comes to, electrolytes and hydration for, upping their performance?
Right. I mean, don't even mention upping performance, but just being able to endure long training hours. Being hydrated is one thing, but sometimes people train hard and they get muscle cramps, right? And if you have taken part in any kind of race, whether it's a running type race like a marathon or at a hybrid race like HYROX, often you'll see people who have fallen out of the race and they're on the floor and they're clenching their legs in pain because they suffered a cramp. And how we can mitigate that is by having a good electrolyte replenishing strategy. That is one of the first things I talk about when I guide people towards performing well at their HYROX race, especially as it gets closer and closer to race day. I always stress the importance of training at a high level, and to train at a high level of intensity for prolonged durations, you've got to ensure that you are consuming sufficient electrolytes, not just before the race, but also during and after the race. So it could be as simple as having an electrolyte filled drink in the lead up to the race, and then having gels to consume during the race. And those are like the most typical thing that you would see hybrid racers do. That is watching the amount of electrolytes that they put into their body before, I would say about an hour to 2 before and during the race. Failing to do any of these strategies would result in more sluggish performance. You find yourself unable to channel the energy and the strength that you were able to do during training, and then in the worst case scenarios you get a cramp that makes it very hard for you to continue with the race. Yeah.
So it really sounds like a lot of the other stuff we talked about are kind of like a nice to have, but when it comes to hydration, electrolytes, it's kind of like a need to have. It's like a base level foundation that if you don't have that, the rest is kind of out the window.
Totally non-negotiable.
Yeah. Well, awesome. We've talked about a lot of different things today, from supplementation, training strategy, HYROX specific, hybrid athlete, and I'd be curious, from your perspective with your science background, exercise science, training high level athletes, what do you see coming up, whether it's from a training perspective, potentially just a trend perspective in the fitness space, or in maybe kind of like the supplement or alternative recovery space that is kind of getting you excited?
I think in the last decade we've seen a strong surge of interest in especially since COVID, people have been shown to be running a little bit more. They are a bit more health conscious. And what I'm particularly fond of in terms of the growing trend in the last 10 to 15 years is seeing more women in the gym. So more and more women are more receptive to lifting weights, where 20 years ago when I was in the gym, you barely see a single female in the gym, and these days the number of females can be more than the males, and that's really a very motivating sight to see. So I would like to see more and more ladies try and understand lifting weights more, and which is already happening, because right now on social media and on many other platforms, people are putting out great content, educational content. So if you were to engage someone in the gym now versus 20 years ago, you will find that the level of education of the typical person in the gym is way higher than what it was 20 years back. So, and I'm hoping that with this new trend where people are just getting their information through various sources, that they would start to think of more ways to address recovery that is not just about going for massages, that is not just doing stretching after an exercise session, because those ideas are quite, they work, but they are time consuming. So things that we can already do that helps with recovery, for example, would be just sleeping better, and all you have to do is do less. Maybe don't work so much at night, put your work aside and just get more sleep instead of doing more work at night. And in my own experience, I think, and I see a lot of hybrid races now, and these hybrid athletes are a pretty health conscious subset of the population. They are conscious about the need for electrolytes during a race. They are conscious about the need for a higher protein intake every single day. And I think there are really supplements out there that can help them with training and recovering better. And like we mentioned earlier, supplements like rhodiola rosea has been shown to have pretty good effects when it comes to just pushing the body a little bit harder. And I think these are new frontiers in the world of supplementation that I hope will be explored further by the average gym goer. As someone, as a fitness professional who just wants to see more and more people engage in exercise, I think for us to enjoy exercise, we have to feel good after exercise. So many people who start off exercising don't feel good. We have to be honest with that. They feel sore for several days. Walking hurts. Getting up off the bed hurts. So that feel good effect doesn't come immediately. So I think what can encourage sedentary people to continue with a new exercise plan is to reduce the level of soreness, to help them recover faster so that they can start training again sooner. I think anything that can achieve any of those effects would be something I would recommend to people. So sleep and supplementation, and obviously a holistic dietary kind of strategy.
Yeah, I think kind of, what you're saying as a whole is there's a big health movement, and a lot of it really comes down to there's more education around it, more support, more research, and getting people comfortable with training, and getting it to a place where they're not only comfortable training, but they know why they're doing it, and they can have community around it to continue to push a health movement. Is really cool, right? And I'm sure yourself, who's been in the gym a long time, trained a long time, knows the research. It's moving away from just probably kind of marathon runners and just bros in the gym to even females getting into weightlifting, right? There's a lot of research coming about the importance for them in creatine is almost more than males, right?
Yep.
And so it's why we do these interviews, right? To kind of get the word out of what's really going on behind the scenes, kind of taking away the veil of what just used to be hearsay, applying the science, and like also trying to, you know, bring out experts in the community like yourself so that people get comfortable. They see that, you know, they're not the only one, and, you know, just get them excited to be fit.
Yep. And I think that's one of the beauty of this upcoming trend of hybrid fitness racing. That is, in the past, you would have different tiers of a running race, like the super fit will take part in marathons, and then you've got the half marathons, you've got the 10-kilometer runs, and then the 5-kilometer joy runs for those who aren't as serious into running. And now the fact of the matter is you've got many people taking part in different runs, and you don't really cross paths, you know. Now the beauty of HYROX is that whether you are fit or unfit, you would mix with people of different calibers, you know. And I think it has offered us a chance to be a bit more aspirational when it comes to our fitness level, because just based off the last few years, you can see that people who take part in HYROX don't just do it once. Once you do your first HYROX, you then catch the HYROX fever, and then you get inspired by the people who are doing better than you, and then that motivates you to do a second race. And while trying to pursue better timings, you start to train harder, you start to try and understand your body a bit better, you know, how to recover better, how to train better. So a typical HYROX athlete then slowly gains this knowledge and gains a love for exercising. So this is what we call a good relationship with exercise. You know, you enjoy what you're doing, you're aspirational because you want to do better. So it is intrinsic. There is no external motivation for you to want to do better. It is all coming from your own self. And I think that is, you know, in sports psychology, we say that an intrinsic motivation is always the best source of motivation, right? And I see this being replicated over and over with people who are doing multiple HYROX races. They just want to be better, a better version of themselves. Even just improving by a minute or two of their race time already brings them immense joy.
Yeah.
You know, and it truly is a one of a kind, I think, type of race. I see the runway for HYROX going a few more years, and I'm sure, you know, if the organizers are smart about the planning, they would start to introduce new elements to keep it fresh. So yeah, I do enjoy this shift in the fitness racing industry, and I do look forward to the next few years.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's you know, kind of our and younger generations are really whether it's, you know, through the community aspect of HYROX or having these events that they can look forward to and train to, really creating what could be a foundation for the lifelong pursuit of fitness, right? Whatever that specific goal looks like at, you know, that point in time for whatever that is. But, you know, I think we can both agree that it's great if you do one HYROX, right? But it's about the keeping it up for as long as possible to be as healthy as possible.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if one day you are no longer interested in HYROX, but you would have gained such a good wealth of knowledge, and then you start looking for the next thing to be good at. And I think HYROX is just a tool to get you to be involved in your own health and your own fitness, you know, to show you that you can do better with smarter training, smarter supplementation, better recovery. And once you find that it doesn't motivate you as much, just move on to the next race or move on to the next activity that catches your attention. And you find that once you start training the body and you see an improvement in your physical fitness, perhaps you might like to revisit something you used to do as a child. Perhaps you were involved in certain sports as a kid, and now you want to do it again. And I'm a big proponent of doing sports because it brings a type of fun that may or may not be achievable by going to a gym. You know, so I often encourage my own clients, people who trains with me, that you're already so fit, perhaps look at doing something that you enjoyed doing in the past, revisit an old sport. I think that is something that can help someone to stay active and have fun while doing it, and for a longer period of time.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to end it.
Right.
Thanks, Boon.
Hope you enjoyed our interview with Boon. It was great to talk to him about all things HYROX and hybrid athletics and recovery. If you want to work with Boon, you can check him out at F45 here in Singapore, as well as check out some of the different benefits of whether it's creatine, electrolytes, rhodiola that we put in our product at Hybrid Health for hybrid hydration over at hybridhealth.club, or you can check us out on social media at Hybrid Health Co. If you're looking forward to more things like this, hit the subscribe button or give us a follow so that you can see more clips from interviews like this.